This morning at 8 a.m., Donald Trump's border czar Tom Homan walked up to a podium and did the one thing that bullies hate doing the most. He blinked. Breaking news out of Minneapolis, the Trump administration has officially announced the immediate withdrawal of 700 federal agents from the Twin Cities, effective today. Make no mistake about what you're seeing. This is not a strategic adjustment. This is not a mission accomplished. This is a panic move. You do not pull 700 federal officers out of a major American city unless you're bleeding. You don't retreat unless the pressure is breaking you. For weeks, we have seen the general strike paralyze the city. We have seen businesses revolt. We have seen raw footage of agents pulling gun on civilians over hand symbols. And today, the administration looked at the polling, looked at economic damage, and decided they couldn't take the heat anymore. And this is the biggest but of the entire presidency. Do not let them gaslight you into thinking this is over. Because in the same breath that Homan announced 700 were leaving, he admitted that terrifying truth about how many are staying. And he issued that a threat to the people of Minneapolis that sounds less like a government official and more like a hostage taker. Today we're going to break down the fake math of this withdrawal, the economic collapse that forced their hand, and the dangerous new phase of this occupation. They're retreating, but they aren't gone. Let's get into it. Let's look at the numbers, because this is where the spin happens. Tom Homan wants a headline that says, "The escalation." He wants Governor Walz and Mayor Frey to say, "Thank you." And to their credit, the local officials call it a step in right direction. But let's be real. Before the nightmare started, before the Operation Metro Surge, there were roughly 150 federal immigration agents in the Minneapolis area. That was the baseline. Today, Haman says he's withdrawing 700. Do the math. That leaves 200 federal agents still occupying the city. 2,000. That is still an occupying army. That is 13 times the normal presence. If you have 2,000 federal agents roaming the streets of a single American city, checking papers at bus stops, entering apartment buildings without warrants, and arresting fourth graders on their way to school, that is not a drawdown. That is a siege. Homan is trying to buy peace with token gesture. He thinks if he removes 700 agents, the protests will stop. He thinks the general strike will end, but he thinks you will go back to work and forget about Alex Preddy. He thinks you will forget about Renee Good. And his language is the worst. This is the part that should send a chill down your spine. When asked when the rest of the agents would leave, Haman didn't give a date. He didn't give a metric of criminals caught. He gave a condition. He said a complete drawdown is contingent upon the end of the illegal and threatening the activities against ICE and its federal partners. Translation: we will stop occupying your city when you stop protesting us. He really meant that. He's holding the entire population of Minneapolis as hostage. He's saying if you exercise your First Amendment rights, if you march in the streets, if you film our agents, we will punish you by keeping 2,000 troops in your neighborhoods. That isn't law enforcement. That is extortion. That is the tactic of regime that views its own citizens as enemy combatants. He's telling you your behavior determines their presence. But in a free country, the government answers the people, not the other way around. So why did they blink? Why pull 700 agents out today? If they are so tough, if they are so committed to law and order, why retreat at all? Follow the money. It always comes back to the money, right? A new report just dropped mid Minneapolis, the city's tourism board, and the numbers were catastrophic. The 80% of the businesses in the Twin Cities have reported canceled bookings, postponed events, or massive drops in sales. We're talking about restaurants down 50%. We're talking about hotels sitting empty. We're talking about retail shops closing their doors because nobody wants to shop in a city that looks like a war zone. The mayor of Brooklyn Park, a suburb right in the middle of this, explicitly warned the economic damage from Trump's surge is comparable to COVID pandemic. Think about that for a second. Donald Trump's political stunt has done as much as damage to the Minneapolis economy as a global plague. And who owns these businesses? These aren't just liberal elites or something. These are small business owners. These are construction contractors. These are people who probably voted for lower taxes and deregulation. And instead, they got an occupation that killed their livelihood. The phones at the White House haven't been ringing off the hook with calls from civil rights leaders. Trump ignores those. They have been ringing with the calls from donors, from Chamber of Commerce types, from corporate CEOs who are looking at their quarterly projections for the Midwest and seeking red ink. They're telling Trump, get your guys out here. You're bankrupting us. That is why Homan is at podium, not because he grew a conscience, not because he feels bad about fourth grader they detained, but because the surge is bad for business. The general strike worked. The boycott worked. You made it too expensive for them to stay. So good job. And while they play their games with numbers 700 out, 2000 in, let's look at the human lives they're destroying on their way out the door. In the last 48 hours, we have seen the two extremes of administration's cruelty. On one hand, we have Don Lemon, a former CNN anchor, a journalist. He was covering the protests. He was doing his job, and how did they treat him? Did they give him a ticket? No. They sent a dozen federal agents to arrest him inside a hotel in Los Angeles. A SWAT team for a reporter. That's actually the message, if you listen well. That is them telling every journalist in America, if you touch this story, we will come for you. Basically. And this is a quote from Elizabeth Zuna's superintendent. We do not know the status of Elizabeth's health. And on the other hand, we have Elizabeth Zuna, a fourth grader, a little girl on her way to school in Columbia Heights. They detained her, they shipped her all the way to a detention center in Texas, and now they are releasing her. They want credit for releasing a child they kidnapped. But read the fine print in the superintendent's statement. The detention center in Texas has a messless outbreak. They held a fourth grader in disease-ridden facility, and now they're sending her back to her parents, potentially sick. This is the reality of Operation Metro Search. It's not about catching bad hombres, it's about terrorizing fourth graders and arresting reporters. And now Tom Homan wants a pat on the back because he only going to keep 2,000 agents doing this instead of 3,000. No, we don't give a credit for that. You don't get applause. You don't get applause for stopping some of the abuse. You stop it all of it. Governor Walz said it best. We need a faster and larger drawdown. He knows that as long as even one of those agents is roaming in the streets with the authority to pull a gun on a driver over a hand symbol, the city is not safe. Homan knows his agents are out of control, and Trump knows it too, for sure. He knows that every day they stay, there's another chance for a viral video that makes them look like thugs. He knows that they're one bad interaction away from another Alex Preda situation. One bad interaction away from another Rene Good. He's pulling those 700 agents to protect the administration from the liability of their own lawlessness. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us with victory, for sure. A partial victory, but a victory for sure. 2,000 agents are still here, and they're dangerous. They're the ones that Homan trusts to keep us under pressure. They are going to try to punish monopolists for their embarrassment. They're going to try to make you pay, forcing them to retreat. Thank you all.